Singing Dutchman Productions. Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch, a podcast where I get to sit down with friends, old and new, and have honest conversations. Today I welcome to the front porch Kelly McManus, one of my newer friends, we'll say, and we'll tell you that story here in a minute, but welcome to the front porch, Kelly.
Thanks, Doug. I'm happy to be here. I will say that I'd much rather be sitting on your porch, though, on some nice rocking chairs, maybe with a warm fire.
It has been a long winter. I think we're all, and lockdown, so I think we're all jonesing for some people time for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's tell the audience real quick a little bit how we know each other. It's kind of I think it's an interesting story. I actually know you first through your father. I worked with your father for a couple years at the school where I teach. And then through him, I got to know about you and your sister because he told us everything about his daughters all the time. Very proud dad. But then it was through our common YouTube connection that we ended up getting to meet each other and collaborating. Can we just tell that story real quick from your perspective, Kelly?
Yeah, sure. I will say that I wish that you had been teaching at the high school that I went to while I was there, although that would obviously not be possible given our ages. But um, yeah, my dad spoke about you quite frequently and thought you were great. And my dad's always been interested in Germany and German and the Amish and Pennsylvania Dutch, and so he would talk about you in that regard. And I was thinking, my channel is focused on cultural differences between Germany and the U.S. And with Pennsylvania Dutch having some history with Germany and some ties to the German language, I started to think about how interesting it could be to do a video with you focused on the Pennsylvania Dutch, and you were kind enough to entertain that. And I think we made 3 videos together, and they're still getting viewed. And lots of comments on them. So people were really excited to learn about the Pennsylvania Dutch through you.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I later on in the conversation, I definitely want to come back to this YouTube journey that you've been on. But I was really honored to be asked to come on your channel and collaborate. And I've shared those videos too through my channel. And like you said, they've gotten a lot of traffic, and it's just been a very positive experience from start to finish. But we'll come back to that a little bit later. Let's go back to the beginning. Tell everybody a little bit where you were born, and just a little bit about your childhood. You don't have to go in depth, but correct me if I'm wrong. So when you were a young child, your dad was still active military, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I was born at Fort Carson, Colorado, which is basically in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Don't remember it at all because I was so young. We moved to Fort Benning, Georgia, which is near Atlanta, near-ish Atlanta. And I do remember a little bit of that. But when I was around 5 or 6 years old is when we moved to Pennsylvania. My dad was still serving in the active duty Army, but was assigned to teach at the ROTC unit at Lock Haven University. And so even though we were nowhere near an active duty military base, we were stationed in Pennsylvania, Lock Haven, so that he could teach at ROTC, and then he ended up retiring there. So that's how I ended up growing up in Lock Haven.
So what, not every child grows up having a dad that wears a uniform throughout their childhood. What was that like for you?
That's a great question. I work now with a lot of people whose parents served, and many of them vividly remember it because their parent continued serving further into their childhood. Whereas with me, I think my dad retired when I was in 5th grade, and I saw him put on his uniform, every morning and come home. But I don't think I really realized that uniform was at the time. I think I was just too young, and because I wasn't near a military base, I didn't get like the cultural experience that I think a lot of military brats typically get. Um, so I just knew my dad was in the Army, but I don't think I had the capacity to understand what that really meant, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. How old do you think you were when that light bulb went off?
Hmm. Yeah, I guess it was it was high school when it came together for me, like what what my dad's service really was and the time period in which he served. And I think that's another thing that's unique about when my dad served. He came into the army right as we were winding down in the Vietnam War, so he never deployed there. Whenever the first Gulf War happened, we were in Fort Benning where I was born, and he was a teacher at a military school there. And so he didn't deploy as part of that effort. And then he retired, and I guess it was 96, 97, so well before 9/11. So he didn't do a lot of the things that I'm now exposed to, or that people, with parents in the military now are exposed to. So it's a little different in that regard.
Okay. So you went to high school, and then at some point you decide that the military is something that you want to pursue as well. How did you come to that decision?
So I think if you were to ask a lot of the people that I went to high school with, they would not have ever told you that I would serve, or guess that I'm still serving today, because it didn't really fit my personality. I describe myself as like a nonconformist, and so going into an organization that's very much about conforming doesn't really jive or make sense. Um, and I didn't decide to join until truly my senior year of high school. And what I remember is my sister, 4 years older than me, so she did the Navy ROTC program and commissioned actually into the Marine Corps. I went up to visit her at Penn State once. And I remember seeing a formation of cadets in their uniform in like a parking lot doing whatever. And I remember thinking to myself, I will always wonder what that life would have been like if I don't join. And so as much as I'd like to sit here and say like I had these grand motivations behind serving, honestly, it was more out of curiosity than anything.
So even though your dad was career military, was did you sense any pressure to serve, or was he pretty much he and your mom were like, "Look, this is a decision totally up to you." Was there some pressure there or not?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe subconsciously I felt that there was an expectation, but I they never directly said anything. It was never overt, and if anything, I would say that my dad was a little hesitant about me joining because he didn't know how I would be treated as a woman joining in the army. And so I think he was a little nervous about that. And honestly, Doug, when I tell you that my classmates would have never guessed that I would join, I think my parents also were like, "Okay, this isn't going to last." They didn't even think I was going to pass my first semester of college. So I think they didn't really expect it to go to where it is today.
Okay. Um, that's interesting. Um, I had a question about that. Oh, yeah. So let's tell the listeners a little bit about your military experience. So you decide to join. Some people, of course, there are probably veterans that are listening to this show that know what they went through. But for you personally, what was that journey like? Where did you go to boot camp? Tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, sure. So I decided to do Army ROTC at Penn State, and applied for a scholarship. And the timing of me applying was very lucky because it was 2005, and that was when the military was really quite desperate for people because of what we were doing in Iraq and Afghanistan at the time. And so I was able to get a 4 year scholarship to go to Penn State, which meant my room and board was not paid for, but all of my tuition was paid for, and I got a monthly stipend. And part of my 4 year ROTC commitment, I had to go to what was called LDAC, the Leadership Development Assessment Camp. So I never went to a basic training boot camp like enlisted soldiers go to. Instead, I went to this leadership development assessment camp. It was a month long. It was, at the time, it was held at Fort Lewis, Washington, which is just an hour south of Seattle on the West Coast. And basically, you go and you are constantly assessed on your leadership skills, and then all of the different tactical skills that you need to have when joining the military. And that was between my junior and senior year. So you get evaluated, you get a score coming out of that. And basically, they assess you based on your score from camp and your GPA, and they decide what branch you're going to go into. And there's several different branches of the Army. Infantry is the one everyone knows, armor branch, which is what my dad was. They're the ones that drive tanks and so on. And I chose to go into the Medical Service Corps. I didn't really know what that meant at the time. But it again, I guess out of curiosity, I was like, I want to go med service. And, my dad, I think, was convinced I was somehow going to become a nurse because his mom was an Army nurse, actually. But no, I did not go to medical school at all. I do medical operations and planning. So, to just say it as concisely as I can, basically, if we decide to go somewhere for some sort of operation, I would be the person deciding how we're going to treat any injuries. So, where a medical treatment facility should go, how we will evacuate casualties off the battlefield, how we'll be able to get soldiers routine medical care, things like that. That's what my job is in the Army.
Okay. You hinted at this earlier, and I definitely wanted to ask you this question. You said your father had some misgivings because he didn't know how you might be treated. Um, it's kind of a tough question, but I really want to ask it. How difficult is it, in your opinion, how difficult is it for women serving in the Army?
I think that this is a very important topic to discuss. And I will say that, obviously I don't have anything to compare it to because I can't know what it's like to be a man serving. I can only make my assumptions based off of how I see men treated in the Army and compare it to how I'm treated. But I'll say that I have not had a negative feeling about how I'm treated compared to my male peers. I don't know if it's just a matter of luck or if I'm just ignorant to any difference in treatment, or what, but I feel like I'm taken seriously. I will say when I first joined, when I was a brand new second lieutenant, platoon leader, joining the Army, I felt like I needed to act like a man. And I know that might sound a little silly, but I had this image of what an officer should be like in the Army, and that was kind of like a Patton type person. So, not that I was walking around just yelling at people, but I wasn't myself. I kept a distance from, the soldiers, and very much tried to present myself as, a leader in the Army. And so that was a challenge that I'm not sure if a lot of my male peers experienced, that need to try to pretend like you're something you're not. But that's what I felt. And then as I continued to serve and I started realizing that I was truly unhappy because I wasn't myself. Um, I started to understand that, if I'm going to continue serving, I need to be me. And that's okay. And the Army is better when we have diversity of thought. That's something that I really think a lot about. And diversity doesn't just come in different, in gender or religion or skin color and race. I mean, it's truly like what your background is and what you bring to the table. Because I'm going to look at a problem totally different than the person next to me who grew up in a totally different environment and with different, you know, a different lens, if you will. And I think that's important for the Army to have that diversity of thought.
How many years are you in now?
12 in May.
12 years in May. How has the Army changed in the 12 years that you've been in?
I think it's changed a lot. I mean, I based on the stories my dad tells, I can tell you it sounds like like I'm like, I don't even know what army you're talking about, Dad, because you're not talking about my army, right? Like it just sounds like it is dramatically changed through the decades. But even when I first came in, Doug, I mean, that was under Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Mm.
And even just that has really been a dramatic shift in the I want to say the short time I've been in. I guess 12 years is a long time, and then the transgender policy, which we are reinstating the ability for, we're getting rid of Trump's transgender ban. So that's a huge shift, and I think with those changes comes a demand for a cultural shift. And I'm excited and encouraged when I talk to different people about where our army is headed in that regard. And I think that we're becoming much more accepting and understanding and less conforming, which again, like I said earlier when we first started talking, I describe myself as a nonconformist. So it's music to my ears.
This is a question I've often wondered, and you would have just as much insight as anyone else that's serving. We go through administrations, we go through different secretaries of defense. That change from one secretary of defense to another is is that really noticeable? From the perspective of the people with the boots on the ground, I mean, is that a huge, like, I think, like, if I get a new principal coming into my building, they're going to come in with their own agenda or what they think they should, how they want to run their building. And I can tell, and I notice the differences. But with the largeness of the United States military and, this $1 trillion budget and of that Congress, you know, gives out, when you change these, because you've served now under multiple different secretaries of defense in your career, is it noticeable, that change?
Man, Doug, you've got some great questions. I think you mentioned it. I think it really matters what level you're serving at as to how much you notice it. And when you're when you're serving at the bottom levels, the platoon levels, the company levels, you might not notice it. Or maybe you notice a change, but you don't know where it's coming from, and you're not realizing it's coming from all the way to the top leadership of the Pentagon. I mean, when I first joined, I don't know if I was really aware of what the Secretary of Defense's priorities were, let alone, the Secretary of the Army's priorities. But now in the position that I'm serving in, I'm working at the Pentagon. I'm working literally in the same hallway as the Secretary of the Army. I'm very keyed in on what their priorities are and what they're saying. And so it's hard for me to distinguish if that's because of where I'm serving or if it's just because I think as a whole, the US and society are we're more keyed in on politics because of what has been going on over the past couple years. I'm not sure, but I mean, we've gone through a lot of secretaries of defense, and yeah, they each have their agenda that they are trying to push. And Secretary Austin, our current Secretary of Defense, of course, is going to be extremely different from any of the secretaries under President Trump, given the difference in the administration. But it's like steering a ship,
Mm.
It's this, like you said, it's a lot of people, and so it's not these huge pivots that we're making. It's steering a very large ship.
Okay. I had When we were setting up this interview, I asked you if it was possible to talk about this next topic, because I definitely don't want to put you in any position, given the position that you're in, to put you in any situation that, you are saying something that could get you in trouble or anything like that. But you said I could ask this question. So, recently in the news, we've heard a lot about sexual assault cases in the military. Um, can you speak a little bit to that for people that maybe just don't aren't following the news, or you haven't just heard this. In a previous episode, I interviewed someone that's involved at Penn State in their student government, and this was one of the things that Penn State is dealing with, right, and a lot of college campuses too. This issue of sexual assault on campus. But now we're having stories coming out that it's happening also in, in our branches of the military. What can you tell our listeners? And we don't have to go, super in depth, but just, what's your take on what's going on here? And I'll have some follow-up questions for you too, I think.
Sure, sure. Again, I think it's important to talk about this. And, you know, the military has been struggling with sexual assault for years. I mean, far before the hashtag Me Too movement blowing up in specifically in Hollywood, the military was already grappling with this issue, and Congress was already very much involved and interested in how the military was dealing with this issue. And seeing the Me Too movement evolve was interesting for me because I felt like for the first time, American society was coming to terms with the fact that we have a sexual assault problem. Even though we've all known, we've had to have known there's a problem. I mean, when I went to Penn State orientation, distinctly remember being told 1 in 4 women on this campus are sexually assaulted. And that is just mind blowing, right? I mean, how terrifying to hear that and then walk around campus and you see all of the phones with blue lights so that if you need help, you know exactly where you can go and hopefully be able to call someone. Of course, this is when cell phones weren't so readily available. Um, and so yes, the military is dealing with it, but I think it's frustrating for me sometimes when I feel like we lose sight of the fact that this is an American problem. This isn't just a military problem. And like the previous person you interviewed talking about on college campuses, I mean, it's an issue. And the military is just in a unique position where we kind of have a microscope on us in a lot of ways, and Congress has oversight over us in their role, and so they have a lot more control over how the military handles sexual assault and sexual harassment, and also definitely an issue compared to how private sector deals with sexual harassment and assault, or even colleges with the Department of Education. And so it's and it blew up specifically this past year with Vanessa Guillen. And that's, I think, when a lot of people that maybe didn't know about sexual assault issues in the military started really paying attention. Vanessa Guillen was a soldier stationed at Fort Hood, which was my first duty station, Fort Hood, Texas, just about a 90-minute drive north from Austin. And she was horrifically murdered, and her body was buried, and she was murdered by a fellow soldier. And she had told her family before she was murdered, which at the time the military had just thought she was missing. She had told her family that she was being sexually harassed at work. And so that's where, I think a lot of people started really paying attention to sexual harassment issues in the military, which is I'm assuming why you saw the news reports that you've been seeing recently. And it's a really sad story. I mean, it is gut wrenching, to hear what happened to her. And Congress has a bill called the I Am Vanessa Guillen bill, act, trying to legislate how the military handles different aspects that could have prevented what happened to her, or at least gotten to the bottom of what happened to her much quicker than what actually took place.
Do
Um,
you feel hopeful for the future in regards to this issue in the military?
you know, I don't know. I think that I don't know what the answer is, and I think if I knew the answer, I would feel more hopeful. For one, I think that, there absolutely needs to be trust, but what is trust, right? And so that's where it's kind of like I don't have the answer. The culture, how do you measure culture, like these metrics, like how do you really get after this? But there needs to be a big push for how we handle sexual harassment and sexual assault complaints and how we litigate those cases. And I think that's really the way forward with it. But I think that there's no clear cut answer,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I think it's the same on the with college campuses too. I mean, there's a lot that can be done as far as education and you know, everybody understanding this is an issue, I think is a huge step forward too. Because like you said, prior to these cases coming out, the average American never would have imagined that our own soldiers are not safe among their comrades, it's beyond horrific, but it's so disheartening too, to know that we have people that have chosen to serve our country and wear the uniform and are having these types of situations, that they're being put into these types of situations, and that they're having this type of harassment or assault is just beyond disgusting. And I hope that through legislation, hopefully, and education, that the military can at least combat this issue, and hopefully, of course, overcome it someday. But I'm sure, as you mentioned, it's going to be again, it's part of that big ship that needs to be turned and steered, and that takes time and a lot of
Mhm.
effort. And I'll be watching the news, because I'm really interested in this topic, just from the aspect of knowing that my fellow Americans are being put into these types of situations. Everybody knows that when you join the military, you are potentially putting yourself in a life altering situation, whether it's combat or accidents happen on military bases. But I don't think anybody is sitting in their easy chair in their living room in Iowa thinking about how their daughter or their granddaughter or their sister or their mother, who's putting on that same uniform, has to worry about not being sexually assaulted on a military base owned by the United States of America. So
Yeah.
I really hope that that's something that we can turn a new leaf on, I guess, turn a new page, or whatever, how you want to say it, and make some progress for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that I can say with confidence is, the military doesn't turn people into sexual predators. I fully believe that people who are the sexual predators joined already with not understanding consent or with malicious intent already,
Yeah.
and so K through 12 education. There was a general, I can't remember his name, who said, "You know what keeps me up at night? K through 12 education." And it really resonated with me because that not necessarily that to put this all on, educators, high school teachers and elementary school teachers, but that those formative years, I think really impact clearly how a person will behave when they're out in the world as an adult. And
No, you are, and here I am as a high school educator, and I understand that 100%, because and I'm going to speak personally here. I don't feel that schools are doing enough about this issue, as at that education level. Like you said, those are the formative years, and we all know that the American family is not what it was in the 1950s. Little Billy and Susie aren't going home every night and sitting at the kitchen table with mom and dad having dinner, talking about what they learned in school, having parents that are instilling these ideas and morals and ethics in their children. It truly is falling more and more on the shoulders of the public school system to make up for that loss. And there's a lot of reasons why kids aren't going home to that family situation these days. And there are some kids, of course, that are lucky enough that do get to go home to that. But there are so many that I see day in and day out that don't have that support system at home, that aren't, young boys that are 13, 14, 15 years old that have constant access to, I mean, let's be realistic. They have open access to pornography anytime they want on their phone. And there, there's these this terrible cycle is beginning there already, and they already have then a distorted idea of what is consent, or what, how am I supposed to interact with someone of the opposite sex, or someone of the same sex. And if they can't talk about it with mom and dad because maybe mom isn't there or dad isn't there, or it's just not a household where that nurturing environment is, then if it doesn't fall to public education, where's it, who is going to pick up that slack? And as a society, I think it's an issue that I personally, as a teacher, of course, in my classroom as a German teacher, I I can talk to my students about these things, but it should be in a curriculum. This should be part of curriculum that students are learning as they're coming from middle school, even late elementary, middle school, and then particularly, getting into the high school level. And I think we are, as in public ed, we're dropping that ball, and the long-term effects could be really scary. I think we're seeing it, having dropped the ball for the last 20 years in public ed. Um, what we're experiencing now. I think. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I agree. I think you made a lot of great points.
So, one other thing, well, that was deep. But again, one of the things, and I've talked a lot about this with other guests. If we don't talk about these are issues that nobody wants to talk about. And if we don't, as a country, as a society, talk about these issues, at least talk about them, then nothing will ever change. And I'm not saying you're ever going to agree with everybody, and it might get hot and heated, but if we're not even acknowledging it and at least asking tough questions, then what are we doing? And I think that's where we're all at this reckoning point, whether it's the army that's now having to truly, put this stuff under the microscope and say, how can we make this better? How can we become better? It falls to every American to do that, and not just through, not just about sexual assault. I mean, we can talk about a lot of different things where we as a country need to look under the microscope a little bit. But just in regards to this, since we've been talking about this, I'll be really interested to see how things progress in the future with this. And I definitely hope that it's all for the best, and things improve. Um, in an email too, while we were talking before the interview, you had mentioned that, and I really want to hear a little bit about this. You served as a defense fellow on Capitol Hill. What was that all about? Or what's that?
I have been extremely lucky with what I've been able to do in the Army. I would have never guessed in my wildest dreams that I would have been doing any of this stuff. So we have a program that I didn't even know about, called the Congressional Fellowship. And essentially, at certain points in your career, you're able to apply for this fellowship. You go to DC, Washington, DC, and you attend George Washington University. So long as you get accepted, you have to apply to the school. And you get a master's degree in legislative affairs through their political management program. So you focus on getting that degree for the first year. And that sets the conditions for you to then go and literally embed in a member of Congress office. And there were 25 of us in my cohort, they call it. Half of us went to the House and served with representatives, and half of us went to the Senate and served with senators. And, the condition being that we're only going to send defense fellows to members that are serving on, a defense related committee. And so there are some that, aren't available to serve with. So anyway, I got to work for a senator, and I worked on his staff right alongside his military legislative assistant, and I wrote his memorandums for hearings. I sat behind him during some hearings. I got to sit in high level meetings that he had with different generals or lobbyists or different state leadership that he had come to his office. I got to travel back to the state a couple times for some engagements there. I mean, it was truly an incredibly, broadening experience is what we say in the Army. It's a broadening experience, but it was eye opening. So even, I was wearing civilian business clothes every day, but I was still, an Army officer. And yeah, it was a great experience. And then, that was in 2019. And then after that, you do what's called the Utilization Tour. So the Army basically is like, okay, we have invested all this into you. You have a degree and you got this experience. Now we need to get something back from you. And so you go and you do a tour in the Pentagon where you basically work as a liaison between the Army and Congress.
You said it was broadening, which I'm sure it was. I can't even imagine. But if one or two things, what were one or two things in your time on Capitol Hill that just completely maybe blew you away or surprised you or, had you gobsmacked? There has to be some, or like you always had maybe this image of what, what the Senate or what a senator was like. And then you're sitting there, elbow to elbow with a senator and with his whole staff. What was maybe two things that really just blew you away, either that you learned, that you were like, I never would have guessed that, or just something that, stepping back, you can now, you can look at from the distance and say, wow, the Senate really moves way slower than I thought it was, or there's way more wrangling than what I ever imagined. Could you share maybe two things?
It's hard to narrow it down to only two. I mean, it was crazy to see it firsthand. So for one, I think I was just really shocked by the staffers for a couple reasons. So, there's quite a difference between the House and the Senate because the senators have a larger budget, so they have a larger staff and oftentimes a more senior staff, a more seasoned staff. But when I say senior, I mean like the oldest person in our office was like 35, 36, and to me that's incredibly young for someone who is directly advising a federal lawmaker making some of the biggest decisions that impact Americans. And I was gobsmacked, to use your word, by that. I mean, I make the joke sometimes like our country is run by a bunch of 20-year-olds. Now, of course, that's doing our actual legislators a disservice. They very much are the driving force. But they are receiving information by their staff who might be straight out of college and have zero life experience, and they're telling their representative or their senator how to vote on a certain, bill.
Hmm.
And I think that's just something that was really surprising to me. Now, with that said, I will say that I had this impression that, like, how can you possibly understand the Army if you haven't served? Because to me, like, I'm still learning about the Army each and every single day. I mean, it is such a huge organization, all these different types of units and missions and so on. So I couldn't fathom a staffer, a military legislative assistant, who sometimes people get confused. That's not someone that's in the military. That is a staffer. I couldn't fathom how they could understand the military enough to be able to conduct oversight of the military, or write the memorandums to have their senator ask meaningful questions during hearings. But they do. I mean, they really do. Now, some of them, obviously, there's a spectrum in terms of talent, but I was thoroughly impressed with how knowledgeable these MLAs, these military legislative assistants, are of everything going on in the military, and how they could speak the language that I thought would be absolutely foreign to them. And then that's not even touching the the professional staff members, and those are the ones who serve on the committees. And I mean, they are impressive how much they know about the military. And I mean, they really take a lot of pride in it, and they keep up to date. They're doing constant engagements with different members in the military, different general officers. They're going to bases, they're seeing things, they're going to different defense industries and physically seeing what's being procured, or the different research and development for different systems that we're looking for. So they're getting that was impressive to me. So sorry, I know I dwelled on that quite a bit.
Yeah,
um,
but I mean, the average American has no idea
right.
about that type of stuff. I mean, I think we all, most Americans have a hard time even naming who their senators are, let alone knowing that they have these people that are, doing all the research, that are advising them, that are helping them, that are writing questions for them, all this stuff. And I think it's important for Americans to know that there is this huge network that keeps the whole machine running, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So at the beginning of the interview, we touched on how we met. So I do want to talk a little bit about this. I think it's an awesome story. Uh, you have a YouTube channel, and you have a very successful YouTube channel. Um, how did that come about?
So, I when I was at Central Mountain High School, I had a teacher, Mrs. Temple. I don't know if she's still there, but she
She is. Yes, I just had lunch with her today.
oh, that's so funny. You would if you brought her up to me, she'd probably be like, "Oh God." Again, would never guess that I'm serving in the military because I was such a little rugrat. Um, I took her media class, which, we would do like some daily broadcasts, and we would make videos and things. And I got really into video editing. And I mean, it was super rudimentary, and it was just using the built-in program on the iMacs that we had there, iMovie. But I really enjoyed it. And I that was right around the time when YouTube started being a thing in like 2005, right? And I remember YouTube just being the thing that you would see a funny video, you'd show your friends, and then you would like move on, right? It wasn't the platform that it is today. And I had no idea what YouTube had become. I guess I was just off in my own little world until I met my boyfriend, Misha, in Germany when I was stationed in Germany. And, when we would hang out, he would turn on YouTube. And I was just like, why do you keep, because again, in my mind, I was like thinking of like 30-second cat video clips, right? Not like entire episodes of different shows or all the things that people can get off of YouTube, even how-to videos. I didn't
Yeah.
realize it. And I told him, oh, I used to do some video editing and I really enjoyed it. And he looked at me and he said, well, you should post a YouTube video. And I was like, oh, I don't know. It's stressful I mean, Doug, it can be stressful putting your work out into the world for their consumption, and you're just at their whims of criticism, and you don't even know who these people are. You don't know where your stuff is going to end up when you post it in a public space like that. And I told him one day that I had an idea for a YouTube video. And it's because I had to go. This is just going to make it sound like I live this crazy life. I had to go to Romania for a military exercise that we were doing there. And, you know, the soldiers there were putting on camouflage makeup, for lack of a better term, and on their face. And I saw this one senior officer looking in a mirror of a car that was parked to fix his makeup, right? And like, I just had this moment where I was like, this is hilarious. Like, I wonder if this guy's wife knows that her husband is out here putting on makeup just like she does every morning, kind of thing, right? And how comical that is. And so anyway, I told Misha, like, what if I were to do a makeup tutorial but with camouflage paint, kind of like a mock makeup tutorial, make it funny, a parody. And he was like, just do it. And so I hesitated and dragged my feet, and then I finally made it. And I recorded it like 7 times. And I was putting on this camouflage makeup every time, which is just, if anybody listening to this has put this stuff on your face, and you know what I'm talking about. It's like putting wax on your face. It's awful. It's so bad for for your skin. And I was just kept on applying it as I was going through this tutorial, and then I would wipe it all off and re-record it because I didn't like the way I said something. And anyway, so I finally posted it, and I shared it with this female mentorship page that I'm on, Army Women's Mentorship page. And I got some views through that, which was encouraging. And of course, like, that was a very targeted audience. I'm doing a mock makeup tutorial with camouflage paint, and of course, women in the military can relate to it and found it interesting, right? So I got that adrenaline rush, of getting, I think I had like about 700 views from that. And I was like, oh, Misha was like, you should do another video. And I was like, well, what can I do it on? And
Yeah.
so it was just like, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And actually the next video I did was me talking about the German Autobahn and my experience of driving on it. And it didn't really get any views. And I do another one, no views. But then I posted a video where I did like a tour of our apartment in Germany. So I think I called it my German apartment. I don't know what I don't even remember what I called it at this point. So anyway, I posted, and Doug, it was a terrible video. I cringe when I look back at it because it's me holding like a selfie style with the camera, because I wanted in my mind, and if you tell Mrs. Temple, she probably won't remember because, God, this was years ago and I'm just one of a bunch of faces she's had. I, for my final in her class, did a cribs style tour of my parents' house, right? And do you remember MTV Cribs?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I was mocking Mariah Carey specifically, where she was dressed, just she did like 5 outfit changes in it. She was outrageous. She got onto her like Stairmaster in high heels. She got in a bathtub at one. It is the most ridiculous Cribs episode I've ever seen, and I was like mocking her in the most horrible way possible. Right? It was just atrocious, more cringe than what I actually posted on YouTube. But so anyway, I was doing it in that style where I didn't have a cameraman, so it's just me, and I'm having the camera on me the whole time, and I'm pointing out different things, and I keep saying and I keep saying this is weird, because I'm just not really thinking about what I'm doing. I don't think anyone's going to see it. Doug, that video now has 1.2 million views.
I know.
I can't believe it. It's garbage. And it's out there, and I'm just waiting for the day for me to be walking around. It would be in Germany because that's where most of my views come from. And for someone to see me and be like, "Oh my God, you're that girl from that video." It's so bad. Like, but anyway, that video took off, and Misha, I was like, "Why are so many people watching this video? It's garbage."
Mm.
And he looked at me and he said, so Misha's German. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. He said a lot of Germans are interested in what Americans think about German culture. And so I was like, okay, maybe this is what I focus my channel on. And so 2.5, 3 years later, that's what I did. And that's where I got my views.
Yeah, it's and I'll definitely there'll be a link to your channel in the show notes so people can
Not
check
the
it out.
apartment video though.
No, I'll just put it to the channel itself, and then they can if they wanna watch it, they can or not. But, no, your channel is great, from a cultural learning aspect. I think, yes, it's geared kinda towards, Germans really appreciate it, but I think it's great for Americans to watch some of your videos, well, all of your videos, because you get that perspective of seeing what things are like in another country, and to see that perspective change of, I'm an American, this is how I'm envisioning Germany in from my perspective, through the lens of my eyes. And I think we need, I think that's so awesome because we often don't get enough of that kind of content from the different cultural perspectives out there, in other countries in the world and what, how other people live. So I often brag your channel up, and I've shared it with, oh my gosh, countless people over the years, and I will continue to because you're putting out some quality content. So I wanted to thank you for that for sure. You're doing
Oh,
great
that is
work.
so kind of you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I've learned a lot from having that channel, just reading the comments, and taking it all in. And I've started doing comedy sketches now, which has been fun and challenging for me because I have to, come up with jokes. And that's hard. And I do them a lot. I try to come up with different cultural or political EU political jokes, and so I have to kind of keep up with the EU politics. And but yeah, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Kelly, we close every episode out with 10 quick questions that I ask all of my guests. And I hope you're ready for these. There's nothing that's going to like embarrass you or anything like that. It's just 10 quick questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I
Okay,
think
here we go. Question number one. What is your morning drink of choice?
coffee
How do you take your coffee?
with a little bit of creamer. I'm kind of picky on my creamer though, but with a little bit of creamer. Yeah,
Yeah. I'm picky too in the sense that I really prefer just plain half and half.
yeah,
And if I don't have half and half, like if somebody just gives me milk, it yeah, I'm
right,
a little picky about that. That's just the way
right.
that I am, I guess. All
Just
right, question number two. Who is a go-to musical artist for you?
Taylor Swift.
Oh, there you go.
I
Shout
love
out to my
her.
hometown. Her and I are from the same hometown.
Right?
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. Oh gosh, I love her. I think she's a great person.
She's doing a lot of good stuff, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Question number three. What is a movie that you can watch over and over again and it never gets old?
Mean Girls. I
Okay.
love Mean Girls and Drop Dead Gorgeous, which is not a movie a lot of people
Yeah, I'm
know
not
about.
familiar with that one.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Okay.
It's from like 1998 and Mean Girls and Drop Dead Gorgeous, I could watch them. Those are the only two actual movies, physical movies I own.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the last thing that you read?
So I just read, and maybe you'd be interested in it, Doug. It's a book called Show Your Work. It's by Austin Kleon, and it's not the typical kind of book that I read, but it was recommended to me, and it's all about like kind of what I was just saying. It's scary to put your work out into the world, and this book really just drove the point home of like just do it.
Mm,
Just do it. Just get it out there.
yeah.
And I
I'm gonna have
like
to
it.
check that out. That sounds really good.
Yeah.
Okay. Number five. What's your favorite pizza topping?
I like green peppers.
Okay. Okay. Uh, number six. Laying on the beach or going for a hike?
Oh my god, a hike,
Yeah.
1,000 times a hike
Yeah.
over. I do
Thank you.
not
Yeah.
care
Me
about
too. Me
beaches.
too.
Yeah.
Number seven. You've invited me over for dinner. What are you making?
Probably salmon
Okay.
with the
I like
mango
salmon.
salsa. Yeah,
There we go. Sounds
yeah.
good. You've traveled a lot, so I'm curious about this question. Number eight. What is a dream vacation destination for you?
Japan.
You haven't been to Japan
I
yet?
have not. I'm dying to go. Thankfully, Misha wants to go there too, and yeah, we are so excited to eventually go one day.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd really like to go to Japan myself someday. Just for me, it's just for the food alone. I'd love
Right?
to eat. I'd love to eat over there. I think
Yeah,
that would be so awesome.
I
Hopefully
know.
someday.
Yeah.
Uh, okay. Here's number nine. What is something that you are afraid of?
Um, so one, I'm pretty convinced that one day I'm gonna die in a plane crash. I
Ooh,
know that
okay.
maybe that sounds bad. I'm scared of heights, and so I don't know if that plays into it. Um, and I don't love snakes at
Okay.
all. So those two things.
All right. Last question. What job, other than your current one, would you love to have?
So speaking of hiking, my dream job would be to lead a hiking group where every week I take a group out on a hike.
That sounds like a pretty nice job.
Right?
Yes.
I know.
That would be cool. That would be cool.
I know.
Well, Kelly, it has been an absolute pleasure talking with you this evening and having you on the front porch. I want to first and foremost say thank you for your service to our country. I know, sometimes I think that's so cliche to say to people, and I've never worn the uniform. I come from a family that has had veterans in it. My grandfather served in World War II. My great uncle was killed in World War II, and I have lucky enough to know that I have great great grandfathers that served in the Revolution, but you know when I say that to veterans, I sometimes think, does it? I hope they understand that I truly mean it when I say it. because I think sometimes it just rolls right off the tongue. Oh, thank you for your service. But I truly mean that. Thank you. Honestly, thank you for all that you've done, all that you're doing now, and I'm sure all that you will do in the future in your military career. I can't, I don't take anything that you guys, the military does lightly at all. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service, and just thanks for coming on the show. It was just a great conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, Doug, and I would be remiss if I don't say this. So yeah, I mean, we I don't know how other service members feel about it when we get thanked for our service. I usually say thank you for your support. Sometimes if I'm feeling a little cheeky, I'll say thank you for your tax dollars, because of how big our budget is. But Doug, I think about this a lot, and you as an educator, I mean, I, I wish, and I think COVID has highlighted this a little bit. Um, but thank you for your service. I mean, the impact that you have on, our community. I say ours, though I'm still living there, but like the community there, is something that needs to be recognized. And you impact students every day. And of course, I see on your Facebook, like, you continue your connections with your students as they go on. And I mean, I'm really always impressed to see that from you. I've talked to my dad about it, and so I want to thank you for your service. I mean, you do a lot for your students, and I know that they are incredibly grateful, and I think that they were very lucky to have you.
Well, that was thank you very much. Yeah, well, you're gonna get me emotional here after a while. Thank you, Kelly.
Didn't mean to do that, but
No, that's okay. Everyone, I will link Kelly's YouTube channel to the show notes, so you can check that out. And once again, Kelly, just thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. 5 stars only, please. Follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just look for Doug's Front Porch. Also, please feel free to tell all of your friends about the show, and I'll see you all next time on my front porch.